The morning sun cast long shadows across the outdoor patio of the riverfront cafe. It was that perfect time of day when the air still held a hint of coolness before the heat took over. The cafe sat at the edge of town, where the busy streets gave way to a small park that ran alongside the river. On Sunday mornings like this one, the place had a calm feeling that drew in both regulars and those just passing through. Among the usual faces was Tom, a man in his mid-40s with broad shoulders and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him without giving much away. Every Sunday for the past 3 years, Tom had claimed the same corner table on the patio. And every Sunday, his loyal companion Rusty would settle at his feet with a contented sigh. Rusty was a golden retriever with a coat that had darkened with age. At 8 years old, he moved a bit slower than he once did, but his warm brown eyes still held the same gentle spirit. The staff at the cafe often joked that Rusty was better at customer service than they were. He had a way of sensing when someone needed a friendly nudge or a head to pat. The usual Tom called Diane, the owner of the cafe. She was already pouring his black coffee before he could answer. "You know me too well," Tom replied with a slight nod. He reached down to scratch behind Rusty's ears. The dog leaned into his touch, eyes closing in happiness. Tom carefully tied Rusty's blue leash to the table leg, giving it enough slack for the dog to lie down comfortably, but not enough to wander into the path of servers or other customers. It was a routine they had perfected over the years. "And a bowl of water for the real boss," Diane said, placing a ceramic bowl on the ground near Rusty. The dog lapped at it gratefully, his tail sweeping slowly across the wooden deck. Tom opened the newspaper he'd brought with him, but his eyes kept drifting to watch the people around him. It was a habit he couldn't break, this constant awareness of his surroundings. Before retiring, he had spent 15 years in the military, and some things stayed with you. He noticed a young couple at a nearby table, their heads bent close together over shared pancakes. An older man reading a book alone, pausing occasionally to look out at the river. A family with 2 small children trying their best to sit still. These quiet observations gave Tom a sense of peace. Regular life going on all around him. It helped ground him on days when his mind wanted to drift back to places he'd rather forget. "Morning, Tom." "Morning, Rusty," said Leo, the cafe's weekend cook, stepping out from the kitchen for a quick break. He was a lanky guy in his 30s who had once been Tom's neighbor. "Got something special for your buddy today." Leo held out what looked like a homemade dog biscuit. He knelt down to offer it to Rusty, who sniffed it politely before taking it gently from his fingers. "You're spoiling him," Tom said, but there was no real complaint in his voice. "He deserves it." "Best behaved customer we've got," Leo replied with a grin. "How's the volunteer work going? Still at the shelter on Thursdays?" Tom nodded. "They've got 3 new rescues this week. One of them reminds me of Rusty when I first got him, scared of his own shadow." Before his retirement, Tom would never have imagined himself working at an animal shelter, but Rusty had changed so much for him. The dog had come into his life during the darkest period, when the nightmares kept him up most nights and leaving the house felt impossible. A buddy from his old unit had suggested a service dog, and though Tom had been skeptical at first, it had turned out to be the best advice anyone had ever given him. "You're good with the scared ones," Leo said. "They can tell you understand." Tom shrugged off the compliment, though it meant more to him than he let on. "Just patience, that's all." Diane returned with his breakfast. 2 eggs over easy, whole wheat toast, and a side of crispy bacon. It was nothing fancy, but it was exactly what he wanted. The consistency was another thing Tom appreciated about these Sunday mornings. In a world that often felt unpredictable, there was comfort in knowing some things stayed the same. As he ate, Tom watched a group of cyclists ride past on the path beside the river. They were dressed in bright colors, their bikes sleek and expensive-looking. Rusty's ears perked up at the whirring sound of their wheels, but he remained peacefully stretched out under the table. An older woman stopped by their table, her face lighting up at the sight of Rusty. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the dog. Tom nodded. "He's friendly." She bent down to stroke Rusty's head, and the dog responded with a gentle thump of his tail against the wooden deck. "I had a golden just like him when my kids were growing up," she said, a hint of sadness in her voice. "Best dog we ever had. Lived to be 14. "They're special, that's for sure," Tom agreed. These small connections happened almost every week. People drawn to Rusty, sharing stories of their own beloved pets, past and present. Tom had never been one for small talk, but with Rusty as the focus, these brief exchanges felt natural. After the woman moved on, Tom checked his watch. They had about another hour before they needed to head to the park for Rusty's weekly play date with other dogs from the neighborhood. It was another ritual that had slowly become part of their life together, something Tom would never have sought out on his own, but now looked forward to each week. The cafe was filling up as the morning went on. A line had formed at the counter inside, and the tables around them were all occupied now. The sounds of conversation and clinking dishes created a pleasant background hum. Rusty had dozed off, his chest rising and falling steadily. Tom sipped his coffee, now halfway through his second cup. The newspaper lay forgotten on the table. Instead, he found himself watching a small bird hopping between empty tables, picking up crumbs. There was something soothing about these moments of just being present, not thinking about the past or worrying about the future. "Mind if I join you?" asked Mike, another regular who often stopped by their table to chat. He was a retired teacher with a dry sense of humor that Tom appreciated. "Go ahead," Tom said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Mike set down his coffee and a plate with a slice of Diane's famous blueberry pie. "The weekend special," he explained, though Tom already knew Mike's weakness for anything with blueberries. "How's the new place working out?" Tom asked. Mike had recently moved to a smaller apartment closer to his daughter's family. "Still finding places for everything. Amazing how much stuff you collect over 30 years in the same house." Mike shook his head. "But worth it to see the grandkids more often. My daughter brought them over yesterday, and they turned the whole place upside down in about 10 minutes flat." Tom smiled at the image. "Sounds about right." "Speaking of which," Mike said, leaning down to pet Rusty, who had woken up at the new arrival. "This guy's looking good. That limp from last month all better now?" "Almost," Tom replied. Rusty had strained a muscle chasing after a squirrel, and for a couple of weeks Tom had been worried. The dog was getting older, and these little injuries took longer to heal. "Vet says to keep our walk shorter for another week, just to be safe." They fell into easy conversation about local news, the changing riverfront development, and a new trail that had opened up in the nearby state park. This was another part of Sunday, mornings that Tom had come to value, these conversations that asked nothing of him except his presence and occasional input. The cafe's patio had a clear view of the bike path that ran alongside the river, curving just before it reached the outdoor seating area. A sign near the bend clearly marked, "Cyclists, please dismount," a safety measure Diane had insisted on after a few close calls with speeding bikes near her customers. Most riders respected the sign, slowing down and walking their bikes past the cafe before continuing on their way. Tom watched as a family with young children on small bikes carefully followed the rule, the parents pointing out the sign to their kids as a teaching moment. The morning stretched on pleasantly. A street musician had set up near the river, and the gentle sounds of an acoustic guitar drifted toward them. Rusty's ears twitched at the music, his head lifting slightly before settling back down. The sun had risen higher now, and Tom shifted his chair to stay in the patch of shade cast by the cafe's large umbrella. Mike was in the middle of describing his daughter's new job when they heard it, the sound of bicycle wheels moving much too fast along the path, followed by Diane's voice calling out a warning. Tom turned his head just in time to see a biker heading straight for the patio area, hunched over the handlebars of a mountain bike, eyes fixed on the phone in his hand rather than the path ahead. Tom's body tensed instinctively. Everything seemed to slow down as he watched the bike veer off the path and onto the patio. The rider, a young man with a backpack slung across one shoulder, was completely unaware of his surroundings, thumbs tapping rapidly on his phone screen. "Hey!" someone shouted, but it was too late. The front wheel of the bike bumped over the small step up to the patio, causing the rider to look up in surprise. By then, he was already among the tables, trying to correct his course, his bike wobbling dangerously close to where Rusty lay. Tom was already moving, reaching for Rusty's leash to pull him closer. But in that split second, the bike's back wheel swung wide as the rider tried to make a sharp turn. There was a sickening thud as the pedal struck Rusty's hind leg, followed by a sharp yelp that cut through all other sounds on the patio. The peaceful Sunday morning shattered in an instant. The crash seemed to freeze time for a moment. Then everything erupted at once. Rusty's painful yelp cut through the peaceful morning air, causing heads to turn all across the patio. The biker tumbled sideways off his bike, landing hard on the wooden deck. His phone skidded away under an empty table, while his mountain bike clattered onto its side, wheels still spinning uselessly. Tom was on his feet instantly, knocking his chair backward. "Rusty." His voice broke as he rushed to his dog's side. The golden retriever was trying to stand but couldn't put weight on his back leg. Each attempt made him whimper, a sound that tore straight through Tom's heart. "What the hell, man?" the biker shouted, scrambling to his knees. He was a young guy, maybe early 20s, with a patchy beard and a baseball cap turned backward on his head. "Your dog got in my way." Tom didn't even look up. His full attention was on Rusty, gently running his hands over the dog's trembling body, carefully examining the injured leg. There was no blood, but Rusty flinched when Tom's fingers found a spot just above his back paw. The dog's brown eyes looked up at Tom with confusion and pain. "Someone call a vet." Diane had rushed from behind the counter, a towel still clutched in her hand. "Is he okay, Tom?" "I don't know," Tom said, his voice tight with worry. "He can't put weight on his back leg." The biker had gotten to his feet now, brushing dirt off his jeans. "Look, it's not my fault. These tables are too close to the path. And that dog shouldn't be here anyway. Aren't there health codes or something?" A dangerous silence fell over the patio. Several customers who had stood up to see what happened exchanged glances. Mike, who had been sitting with Tom, stepped forward, positioning himself between Tom and the young man. "That sign right there," Mike pointed to the clearly visible "Cyclists Please Dismount" sign, "has been there for years. You were on your phone, not watching where you were going." The biker scoffed, bending to pick up his bike. "Whatever, old man. The dog's fine. Just making a big deal out of nothing." Tom finally looked up from Rusty. His face had gone very still, but something in his eyes made the young man take a step back. Tom carefully placed Rusty's head down on the deck and rose to his full height. He wasn't a particularly tall man, but there was something about the way he stood. Shoulders squared, hands steady at his sides, that commanded attention. "That's a service dog you just hit," Tom said quietly. His voice was controlled, but anyone listening could hear the effort it took to keep it that way. "And you were riding where you shouldn't be, too fast, not paying attention." The biker glanced around, suddenly aware that everyone on the patio was watching. A few people had phones out, possibly recording. His bravado faltered slightly. "Look, man, I didn't see the sign. It was an accident." He took another step back, dragging his bike with him. "I gotta go. I'm already late." "You're not going anywhere," Diane said firmly. She had her phone out now. "I'm calling Dr. Peterson. He's the vet a few blocks away. He might be able to come here." She looked at the young man. "And you're going to wait right here until we know if Rusty's okay?" "What?" "No way, I didn't do anything wrong." The biker's voice cracked slightly, higher than before. "You can't make me stay." A large man from a nearby table stood up. He was wearing a faded t-shirt from the local fire department. "I think you should listen to the lady," he said calmly, crossing his arms. The biker looked around, realizing he was surrounded by unfriendly faces. His shoulders slumped. "Fine, whatever." Tom had already turned his attention back to Rusty, kneeling beside his dog again. "It's okay, boy," he murmured, stroking the golden retriever's head. "We're going to get you some help." Leo emerged from the kitchen with a clean towel and a shallow bowl of water. "Here," he said, kneeling beside Tom. "Let's make him comfortable while we wait." Together, they created a makeshift bed using the towel and several others that Diane brought over. Rusty's breathing had calmed somewhat, but he still whimpered when they carefully moved him onto the softer surface. Tom dipped his fingers in the water bowl and let Rusty lick them, making sure the dog stayed hydrated. The biker had retreated to sit on a bench at the edge of the patio, his bike propped beside him. He kept checking his watch and sighing loudly, making it clear he thought this was all a waste of his time. A few customers shot him disgusted looks, but most people were focused on Rusty and Tom. "Dr. Peterson will be here in 15 minutes, Diane announced, putting her phone away. "He was just finishing up with another patient." Tom nodded gratefully. "Thank you." He hadn't left Rusty's side, continuing to stroke the dog's golden fur and speak to him in a low, reassuring voice. Anyone watching could see the deep bond between them. Mike had brought Tom's chair over so he could sit more comfortably next to Rusty. Is there anything else you need? He asked. Tom shook his head. Just waiting now. His eyes briefly flickered toward the young biker, then back to Rusty. Been through worse together, haven't we, boy? He said softly to the dog. An older woman approached cautiously. She was the same one who had stopped earlier to pet Rusty. I'm so sorry this happened, she said. He's such a good dog. Yes, he is, Tom agreed, his voice rough with emotion. You mentioned he's a service dog? She asked gently. Tom nodded. It wasn't something he usually talked about, but right now, with Rusty hurt and vulnerable on the ground, it seemed important that people understood. 5 years now. Best decision I ever made. The woman smiled kindly. I can tell. The way he looks at you, that's love. From his spot on the bench, the biker snorted. It's just a dog, he muttered, though not quite loud enough for Tom to hear. Mike heard him, though. He walked over and sat down next to the young man. What's your name, kid? The biker hesitated, then shrugged. Ryan. Well, Ryan, I think there's something you're not understanding here. Mike's voice was surprisingly gentle. That's not just a pet that got hurt. That dog helps Tom function day to day. Ryan rolled his eyes. He looks fine to me. What's he need a service dog for? Mike lowered his voice. Not all injuries are visible. Tom was in the military for years. He's seen things most of us can't imagine. This seemed to give Ryan pause. He glanced over at Tom, still tending to Rusty with single-minded focus. So, what? The dog helps him how? In more ways than you know, Mike said. Before Rusty, Tom barely left his house. Now he volunteers at the animal shelter, comes here every Sunday, has friends again. He let that sink in. That dog changed his life. Ryan swallowed hard, looking suddenly younger. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I know, but being careless can do just as much damage as being cruel. Mike stood up. Think about it. The atmosphere on the patio had changed. What had started as anger at the thoughtless biker was evolving into something else, a community rallying around one of their own. Someone had brought Tom a fresh cup of coffee. Another person offered their jacket to put under Rusty's head. Leo came out with a plate of bacon, tearing off tiny pieces for Tom to offer to Rusty, who accepted them with gentle licks despite his pain. 15 minutes felt like hours, but finally, a car pulled up at the curb. A man in his 50s carrying a black medical bag hurried toward the patio. I'm Dr. Peterson, he announced. Where's our patient? Diane led him to where Rusty lay with Tom still at his side. Thank you for coming so quickly, Tom said, standing to shake the vet's hand. Of course. Diane filled me in on what happened. Dr. Peterson knelt beside Rusty, speaking softly to the dog as he began his examination. Good boy, Rusty. Let's see what's going on here. The vet's hands moved expertly over Rusty's body, paying special attention to the injured back leg. Rusty whimpered when certain spots were touched, but otherwise remained calm under the doctor's care. Nothing seems broken, Dr. Peterson said after a few minutes, but there's definitely soft tissue damage, probably a sprain, possibly a torn ligament. I'll need to get him to the clinic for x-rays to be sure. Tom nodded, relief washing over his face at the news that nothing was broken. I'll carry him to your car. Hold on, came a voice from behind them. Ryan had approached, standing awkwardly at the edge of the group. His cap was in his hands now, being twisted nervously between his fingers. Is the dog going to be okay? Dr. Peterson looked up. Are you the cyclist? Ryan nodded, looking at the ground. Well, he's hurt, but with proper care he should recover, the vet said, though it may take weeks and he'll need rest and possibly physical therapy. Ryan took a deep breath. I'll pay for it, he said suddenly. The vet bills, I mean. Whatever it costs, the offer hung in the air. Tom's expression didn't change as he studied the young man's face. I'm really sorry, Ryan continued, the words coming faster now. I was being stupid. I was late meeting some friends and I wasn't paying attention and... He trailed off, then forced himself to look directly at Tom. I was wrong. And I'm sorry I hurt your dog. The cafe patio was silent. Even the usual background noise of dishes and conversation had stopped as everyone waited for Tom's response. Tom looked down at Rusty, then back at Ryan. Why should I believe you're actually sorry? It was a fair question, and Ryan seemed to recognize that. He thought for a moment before answering. I guess you don't have to believe me, but I am. He hesitated, then added, My grandpa had a service dog before he died, for his diabetes. That dog saved his life more than once, he shook his head. I should have remembered that. Something in Tom's expression softened slightly. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. He nodded once, acknowledging Ryan's words. Let's get Rusty to the clinic first, Tom said. Then we can talk about the rest. As Tom carefully gathered Rusty into his arms, the golden retriever nuzzled against his chest, trusting despite his pain. Ryan stepped forward hesitantly. Can I help somehow? He asked. Tom paused, then nodded toward his table. Grab his leash and water bowl. We'll need them at the clinic. It was a small gesture, but everyone watching understood its significance. Sometimes the path to making things right began with the simplest of actions. The waiting room at Lakeside Veterinary Clinic was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air, conditioning and occasional clicks from the receptionist's keyboard. Tom sat on a worn blue chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly together. His eyes hadn't left the door leading to the examination room since Dr. Peterson had disappeared through it with Rusty 20 minutes ago. Ryan stood awkwardly near the reception desk, unsure where to place himself. He'd followed Tom and Dr. Peterson to the clinic in what felt like the longest 10-minute drive of his life. Now, with nothing to do but wait, the reality of the situation was settling over him like a heavy blanket. You can sit down, Tom said without turning around. His voice was flat, drained of the anger that had filled it back at the cafe. Ryan hesitated, then took a seat 2 chairs away from Tom. He placed his backpack on the floor and removed his cap, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. Thanks, he mumbled. For letting me come, I mean. Tom nodded once but didn't respond further. The wall clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a practical bun, looked up from her computer. Can I get either of you some water, coffee? It might be a little while. Water would be good, thanks, Tom replied. Same, Ryan added. As she disappeared into a back room, Ryan cleared his throat. So, how long have you had Rusty? Tom's jaw tightened briefly, but he answered. 5 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The precision of the answer caught Ryan off guard. Wow, that's, you know the exact day? April 8th, the day I picked him up from training. Tom finally turned to look at Ryan. The day my life started to make sense again. Ryan swallowed hard. Mike, the older guy at the cafe, he mentioned you were in the military. Tom studied Ryan's face as if deciding how much to share. Army, 15 years. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. That's a long time, Ryan said inadequately. Long enough. Tom's gaze drifted back to the examination room door. When I got back the last time, things weren't good. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't be around crowds. Loud noises, and he shook his head. My buddy from the unit suggested a service dog. I thought it was a stupid idea at first. The receptionist returned with 2 paper cups of water. Both men thanked her, and she smiled sympathetically before returning to her desk. What changed your mind? Ryan asked after taking a sip. Tom was quiet for so long that Ryan thought he might not answer. Rock bottom, he finally said. You either find a way up or you don't make it. The simple truth of those words hung in the air between them. Ryan looked down at his hands. I've never really hit rock bottom, he admitted. Maybe that's part of my problem. Tom raised an eyebrow. You looking for it? No, Ryan fumbled for words. I mean, I've had it pretty easy, I guess. College, parents helping out, good friends. Never really had to, face anything real. Today feels pretty real, Tom observed. Ryan nodded, guilt washing over him again. Yeah, it does. The examination room door opened and both men stood up immediately. Dr. Peterson emerged, his expression neutral as he approached them. How is he? Tom asked, the words rushing out. Better than I expected, actually, the vet replied. No fractures or dislocations. He has a grade 2 sprain of his hind leg along with some bruising. He's in some pain, but I've given him medication for that. Dr. Peterson gestured for them to sit back down, taking a seat across from them. The good news is that with proper rest and care, he should make a full recovery. Tom let out a long breath, his shoulders dropping as tension released. Thank God. What does proper rest and care mean exactly? Ryan asked. Dr. Peterson turned to him with mild surprise, then continued. Limited movement for the next 2 weeks. Very short, controlled walks just for bathroom breaks. No stairs, no jumping, no running. After that, we'll reassess and probably start some gentle rehab exercises. He looked back at Tom. He'll need to wear a brace for support. I'm having my assistant fit him for one now. Can I take him home today? Tom asked. Yes, once we get the brace on and go over his medication schedule. Dr. Peterson hesitated. The biggest challenge will be keeping him inactive. He's a naturally energetic dog, and service dogs are used to having jobs. Being sidelined will be hard on him mentally as well as physically. Tom nodded, understanding the implications. Rusty wasn't just a pet who could lounge around all day. The dog was trained to work, to help, to be active. Will this affect his service dog training? Ryan asked. The question surprised Tom, who glanced at him with slightly widened eyes. It might, Dr. Peterson acknowledged. Extended periods of inactivity can cause some regression in training. But Rusty is well established in his routines, so a few weeks shouldn't cause major issues. The important thing is following the recovery plan exactly. I will, Tom said firmly. The vet stood up. Let me check on that brace and we'll get you some paperwork and medications to take home. After Dr. Peterson left, Ryan turned to Tom. I meant what I said about covering the costs. All of them. Tom studied him for a moment. It's not just about money. I know that, Ryan said quickly. It's the least I can do. What do? Tom asked suddenly. For work or school? The question caught Ryan off guard. I'm finishing up my last semester at the community college. Computer science. I work part-time at the tech repair shop on Main Street. Tom nodded thoughtfully. The vet said Rusty needs to be inactive, but I still need to go to work. I've got some sick days, but not enough for 2 weeks. I could help, Ryan offered immediately, then looked uncertain. I mean, if you'd trust me with him. My class schedule is flexible and I can switch some shifts around. Tom didn't respond right away and Ryan rushed to fill the silence. Or not. I get it if you don't want me around your dog after what happened. Just trying to think of ways to actually help, not just throw money at the problem. It's not a bad idea, Tom said slowly. But Rusty isn't just any dog. He has specific routines, training commands. You could show me, Ryan suggested. I'm a quick learner. Before Tom could respond, the door opened again. This time Dr. Peterson emerged with Rusty limping slowly beside him. The golden retriever wore a black supportive brace around his back leg, but his tail gave a weak wag when he spotted Tom. Tom immediately went to his dog, kneeling down to greet him at eye level. Hey, buddy, he said softly, gently stroking Rusty's head. You're being so brave. Rusty pressed his nose against Tom's chest and the man wrapped his arms carefully around the dog, mindful of his injury. The reunion was quiet but profound, the bond between them visible to anyone watching. Ryan hung back, giving them space. Guilt twisted in his stomach again as he watched Rusty's careful movements, so different from the contented dog he'd glimpsed earlier at the cafe. After a few moments, Tom stood up, keeping one hand on Rusty's head. Let's get you home, boy. The receptionist had prepared a folder with discharge instructions, prescriptions, and a follow-up appointment card. She also handed Tom a leash and collar. This is a special rehabilitation harness, she explained. It distributes weight away from his injured leg and gives you some control to help him balance. Tom examined it, quickly understanding how it worked. Thank you. The bill has been taken care of, she added with a smile. Tom turned to Ryan with a questioning look. I gave them my credit card while you were talking to the doctor, Ryan explained. It wasn't just about looking good in front of you. I meant it, Tom nodded once, a small acknowledgement. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Peterson approached with final instructions. Remember, very limited movement. The medications might make him a bit drowsy, which actually helps keep him calm. Call immediately if you notice increased pain, swelling, or if he refuses to put any weight on the leg. I will, Tom assured him. Thank you for seeing him so quickly. The drive to Tom's house was quiet. Ryan had offered to drive them in Tom's truck since the cab wasn't really big enough for 2 men and an injured dog. Rusty lay across the back seat, occasionally whimpering when they hit a bump in the road. Turn left up here, Tom directed. The blue house with the front porch. It was a modest single-story home with a small but well-kept yard. A wooden ramp ran alongside the 3 front steps, built for Rusty's training, Ryan guessed, though it would be especially useful now. Tom carefully helped Rusty out of the truck and up the ramp. The dog moved slowly, adjusting to the feeling of the brace. At the door, Tom paused and looked back at Ryan, who was still standing awkwardly by the truck. You coming in? Tom asked. Ryan blinked in surprise. You want me to? If we're going to figure out a schedule for Rusty's care, we should probably talk about it, Tom said practically. And I need to show you his routines. A smile broke across Ryan's face. Yes. I like that. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. A worn leather couch faced a modestly sized TV. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with an eclectic mix of titles. The kitchen was visible through an archway, clean but lived in. The only decorations were a few framed photographs and what looked like military commendations in a shadow box on the wall. Tom helped Rusty settle onto a large dog bed in the corner of the living room. The bed was positioned so Rusty could see most of the house from his spot. Next to it sat a small basket containing dog toys and what appeared to be specialized equipment for a service dog. Make yourself comfortable, Tom told Ryan, gesturing to the couch. I'm going to get Rusty some water and his medication. Then we can talk. As Tom disappeared into the kitchen, Ryan took a seat on the edge of the couch. Rusty watched him from his bed, brown eyes still wary but no longer fearful. I'm really sorry, buddy, Ryan said quietly to the dog. I messed up big time. To his surprise, Rusty's tail gave a small thump against the bed. Tom returned with a bowl of water and pills hidden in a small piece of cheese. After Rusty had taken his medication, Tom sat in an armchair across from Ryan. So, Tom said, let's figure this out. Ryan nodded, suddenly nervous but determined. I want to help. Whatever Rusty needs, whatever you need, I'm in. Why? Tom asked bluntly. The directness of the question made Ryan pause. He could have given the easy answer. Because he felt guilty, because he wanted to make amends. But looking at Tom's steady gaze and Rusty's trusting eyes, he found himself digging deeper. Because I need to learn to pay attention to the world around me, Ryan said finally, to see how my actions affect others. And because... He hesitated, then continued. Because when I saw how everyone at that cafe rallied around you two, I realized I've never been part of something like that, something real. Tom studied him for a long moment, then nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. Okay then, he said. Let's start with Rusty's basic commands. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the living room floor, the unlikely trio began forging a new path forward, one careful step at a time. 1 week had passed since the accident at the cafe. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in Tom's living room as Ryan arrived, letting himself in with the spare key Tom had reluctantly entrusted to him 3 days earlier. Morning, Ryan called softly, knowing Tom would already be awake but mindful of not being too loud. Kitchen, came the reply. Ryan found Tom at the table, a cup of coffee in one hand and the newspaper spread out before him. Rusty lay on his special bed in the corner, his eyes brightening when he spotted Ryan. How's our patient doing today? Ryan asked, kneeling down to greet the golden retriever. He was careful not to encourage Rusty to move too much, instead bringing his own face close enough for the dog to sniff and offer a gentle lick to his hand. Better, Tom said, watching their interaction with a thoughtful expression. He slept through the night without whimpering. First time since it happened. That's great, Ryan said, genuine relief in his voice. He'd spent every day this week helping with Rusty's care, showing up each morning before Tom left for work and returning in the evening to check in again. The arrangement had been awkward at first, but they'd gradually settled into a routine. Coffee's fresh, Tom offered. Nodding toward the pot, Ryan accepted gratefully, pouring himself a mug before joining Tom at the table. A notebook sat open between them, filled with Rusty's medication schedule, exercise limitations, and special instructions. So I was thinking, Ryan began scanning the notes. Today might be good for that very gentle range of motion exercise Dr. Peterson showed us. It's been 48 hours since we last tried it. Tom nodded. I did a little this morning. He seemed to tolerate it well. He hesitated, then added, You're getting good at this. The simple compliment caught Ryan off guard. Tom wasn't one for unnecessary words, making his approval all the more meaningful. Thanks, I've been doing some reading online about canine rehabilitation. There are some really interesting techniques we might try once he's further along. Tom raised an eyebrow. We? Ryan felt his face grow warm. I mean, if you want me to stay involved that long. I know I'm just here because you crashed into my dog, Tom finished, but there was no anger in his voice now, Just a statement of fact. Yeah. Tom took a sip of his coffee, considering something. You haven't missed a day. Haven't been late. You've learned all his commands, figured out his quirks. He looked at Ryan directly. Why are you putting so much into this? It was a question Ryan had asked himself many times over the past week. At first, it had been purely about guilt and making amends. But somewhere along the way, it had become about more than that. Honestly, Ryan set his mug down. I've never been needed before. Not really. I mean, I have friends and family who care about me, but nobody's ever actually depended on me showing up, doing the right thing. He glanced at Rusty. It feels good to be responsible for something important. Tom nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Responsibility changes you, he said simply. A comfortable silence fell between them as they finished their coffee. Ryan checked the time. You should get going if you don't want to be late. I've got this covered. Tom stood, rinsing his mug in the sink. I left his lunch prepared in the fridge. Remember, small portions, make sure he stays hydrated, no excitement before or after eating, Ryan recited with a smile. Got it. And don't forget, his brace needs adjusting after he's been lying down for more than an hour. And he gets restless around 11, so that's when I should do the gentle walking circuit around the living room. Tom's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. All right then. He grabbed his jacket and keys, then paused at the door. We'll be at the cafe on Sunday morning. Ryan blinked in surprise. Really? You think he's ready? Doc says a very short outing would be good for his spirits. Familiar place, familiar people. Just a quick visit, then straight home. Tom looked at Ryan meaningfully. Thought you might want to join us. The invitation hung in the air, its significance not lost on Ryan. This wasn't just about Rusty anymore. I'd like that, Ryan said quietly. After Tom left, Ryan settled into what had become his morning routine. He checked Rusty's water, adjusted the pillow supporting his injured leg, and then sat on the floor beside him, gently running his hand over the dog's golden coat. Just you and me again, buddy, he murmured. What should we do today? More reading? He reached for the book he'd left on the side table, a dog-eared copy of Service Dogs, a complete guide that Tom had lent him. Rusty's tail thumped against his bed. Yeah, I know. Pretty dry reading, but important stuff. Ryan opened to where he'd left off, but his mind wandered to the upcoming Sunday visit to the cafe. The thought of facing everyone again made his stomach knot with anxiety. The last time he'd been there, he'd been the villain of the story, the thoughtless kid who'd hurt a beloved dog. What would they think seeing him with Tom and Rusty now? Rusty seemed to sense his unease, nudging Ryan's arm with his nose. You're right, Ryan said, scratching behind Rusty's ears. One day at a time. The morning passed quietly. Ryan followed the care routine precisely, mixing Rusty's medication into a small treat, helping him through the gentle exercises, and keeping him company. He'd brought his laptop and occasionally worked on coding assignments, but frequently paused to check on the dog or simply sit with him. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Ryan wasn't expecting anyone, and a flash of protective instinct surprised him as he went to answer it, first making sure Rusty was comfortable. Mike from the cafe stood on the porch, holding a paper bag that smelled delicious. Hope I'm not interrupting, the older man said. Diane sent me with lunch for you and Rusty. She's been making him special chicken soup all week, says it's good for healing. Ryan stepped back, gesturing for Mike to come in. That's really kind of her. Tom didn't mention anyone was coming by. He didn't know. This was Diane's idea. Mike followed Ryan inside, his eyes immediately finding Rusty. Well, look at you. Looking better already. Rusty's tail wagged enthusiastically at the sight of a familiar face. Easy, buddy, Ryan cautioned, moving quickly to ensure Rusty didn't try to get up. Remember what the doctor said. Mike watched this interaction with interest. You've taken to this caretaking role pretty well. Ryan shrugged, feeling slightly self-conscious. Just following Tom's instructions. Mike set the bag on the kitchen counter. There's a sandwich in there for you, too. Turkey on rye. Thanks. Ryan hesitated. How is everyone at the cafe? Do they all hate me? Mike chuckled. Hate's a strong word. They were angry, sure, but word's gotten around about how you've stepped up. People notice that kind of thing. I didn't do it for that, Ryan said quickly. I know. That's why it matters. Mike glanced around the living room, taking in the books, the careful arrangement of Rusty's bed, the notebook filled with instructions. Tom doesn't let people into his life easily, you know? Ryan nodded. He'd gathered as much over the past week. He's a good guy, much better than I deserved after what happened. Sometimes the right person at the right time can change everything. Mike moved toward the door. I should get back. Diane will want a full report on Rusty's condition. Tell her thanks for lunch, Ryan said. And tell everyone I'm sorry again. For everything. Actions speak louder than words, son. And yours have been saying plenty. With that, Mike left, leaving Ryan with a lot to think about. The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. Ryan and Tom fell into a rhythm of shared responsibility for Rusty's care. Each day, the golden retriever showed small improvements, putting a bit more weight on his injured leg, showing more energy, needing less pain medication. By Saturday evening, Rusty was moving around the house with greater confidence. Though still wearing his brace and moving cautiously, Tom and Ryan sat on the back porch watching as Rusty lay contentedly on a blanket nearby, chewing a special therapeutic toy the vet had recommended. He's doing really well, Ryan observed. Better than expected, Tom agreed. Doc says it's because he's getting excellent care. Ryan felt a swell of pride at the indirect compliment. So about tomorrow, what exactly is the plan? Keep it simple. We'll go to the cafe around 10, stay for maybe 30 minutes, then come straight back. Just enough to give him a change of scenery without overtaxing him. Ryan nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. And you're sure you want me there? Tom gave him a sidelong glance. Rusty seems to want you there. And he's a pretty good judge of character. The next morning dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for their outing. Ryan arrived early, bringing a small cushion he'd purchased specifically for Rusty to use at the cafe. What's that? Tom asked when he saw it. Just something to make him more comfortable. The wooden deck at the cafe is pretty hard. Ryan held it up for inspection. It's memory foam, waterproof cover. Tom examined it, then nodded approval. Good thinking. They loaded Rusty carefully into Tom's truck, securing him so he wouldn't slide around during the drive. The dog seemed to understand they were going somewhere special. His eyes were bright with anticipation. As they pulled into the cafe parking lot, Ryan's stomach tightened with anxiety. Maybe I should wait in the truck, he suggested. Tom shook his head. Too late for that. They've already spotted us. Sure enough, Diane was standing at the patio entrance, waving enthusiastically. Several regular customers were watching their arrival with interest. With Ryan's help, Tom got Rusty safely out of the truck. The dog was clearly excited, pulling slightly against his special harness as he recognized his favorite place. Easy, buddy, Tom murmured. Nice and slow. They made their way to the cafe entrance where Diane waited with barely contained emotion. There's my favorite customer, she exclaimed, kneeling to greet Rusty at his level. We've missed you so much. Rusty's tail wagged furiously as Diane gently stroked his head, careful not to disturb his balance. He looks wonderful, she told Tom, standing up. Her eyes moved to Ryan and her expression softened slightly. Hello, Ryan. Mike tells me you've been quite the nurse. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Just trying to help. Well, your usual table is waiting, she told Tom. And I've got some special scrambled eggs for Rusty, soft and easy to digest. As they made their way to Tom's corner table, Ryan was acutely aware of the eyes following them. He helped Tom get Rusty settled on the cushion he'd brought, adjusting it so the dog could lie comfortably while still seeing everything around him. Once they were seated, the tension Ryan had been feeling began to dissipate. No one was glaring at him. In fact, several people smiled or nodded in greeting. Leo from the kitchen came out specifically to check on Rusty, bringing a small bowl of water and crouching down to speak softly to the dog. The hero returns, Leo said, grinning at Tom. Place hasn't been the same without you two. He glanced at Ryan. 3, I guess now. Ryan didn't know how to respond to that, but thankfully their coffee arrived, saving him from having to try. As they sipped their drinks, more cafe regulars stopped by their table, each wanting to see Rusty and hear about his recovery. Ryan found himself naturally included in these conversations, with Tom occasionally deferring questions about Rusty's daily care to him. Ryan's been managing his physical therapy routine, Tom would say, or Ryan found a better way to adjust his brace. Each time Ryan felt a small glow of pride, coupled with disbelief at how much had changed in just 2 weeks. Toward the end of their visit, as they prepared to leave, the older woman who had been at the cafe on the day of the accident approached their table. She smiled warmly at Rusty, then turned to Ryan. "Second chances are rare gifts," she said simply. "You've made good use of yours." As they carefully loaded Rusty back into the truck, Ryan noticed Tom watching him with an unreadable expression. "What?" Ryan asked. "Nothing," Tom said, then seemed to reconsider. "Actually, there is something. The animal shelter where I volunteer. They're always looking for help, especially people who are good with the animals that need extra care." Ryan understood the invitation for what it was, not just a task or a responsibility, but a bridge to whatever came next in their unlikely friendship. "I'd like that," he said, and meant it more than he could express. As they drove away from the cafe, Rusty dozed contentedly in the back seat, his leg healing a little more each day. In the front seat, 2 men from different worlds sat in comfortable silence, bound together by a golden retriever and a chance for redemption that had started with a terrible mistake. Sometimes, the worst moments could lead to the best beginnings. 6 weeks had passed since the accident at the riverfront cafe. The morning air held the first hint of autumn as Tom and Ryan walked along the river path, Rusty trotting happily between them. The golden retriever no longer wore his brace, though he occasionally favored his back leg slightly after long periods of activity. "He's going to sleep well tonight," Ryan observed, watching as Rusty paused to sniff at a cluster of fallen leaves. "First real walk in over a month." Tom nodded, his eyes never leaving his dog. "Dr. Peterson says he's made a remarkable recovery. Better than expected." "He had good care," Ryan said, then grinned. "And he's stubborn. Like someone else I know." Tom raised an eyebrow but didn't dispute the comparison. The 2 men had fallen into an easy rhythm over the weeks, their unlikely friendship growing stronger as Rusty's leg healed. What had begun as Ryan's attempt at making amends had evolved into something neither man had expected. They reached a bench overlooking a bend in the river and sat down by unspoken agreement. Rusty settled at their feet, content after his exercise. "Got my final checkup with Dr. Peterson tomorrow," Tom said, breaking the comfortable silence. He thinks Rusty might be ready to start easing back into his service work. Ryan felt a conflicting mix of emotions at this news. On one hand, he was genuinely happy for both Tom and Rusty. The bond between man and dog was something special to witness, and he knew how important Rusty's work was to both of them. On the other hand, Ryan had grown accustomed to being needed, to having a purpose in their lives. "That's great," he said, meaning it despite his complicated feelings. "I bet Rusty's ready to get back to work." "He's been practicing his commands even when you're not asking him to." Tom smiled slightly. "I've noticed." He paused, looking out at the river. "Going to be different, though." Ryan waited, letting Tom find his words in his own time. The older man wasn't one for lengthy conversations, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. "Having you around," Tom continued finally. "Rusty's gotten used to it. So have I." The simple admission caught Ryan off guard. "Yeah?" Tom nodded. "Yeah." A family with 2 young children walked by, the kids pointing excitedly at Rusty. Tom gave a nod of permission and they approached cautiously to pet the friendly dog. "Is he a service dog?" the mother asked, noticing Rusty's calm, attentive demeanor. "Yes," Tom replied. "He's just coming back from an injury." "My cousin has a service dog for her seizures," the woman said. "They're amazing animals." "They are," Ryan agreed, watching as Rusty gently accepted the children's attention. "This one changed my life." After the family moved on, Tom gave Ryan a questioning look. "You meant that?" It wasn't a question, but Ryan answered anyway. "Every word." He took a deep breath. "Look, I know once Rusty's fully recovered, you won't need me coming around anymore." "I get that. But I wanted to thank you for..." "Well, for not just punching me in the face that first day, for starters." Tom actually laughed at that, a rare sound that still surprised Ryan whenever he heard it. "Thought about it," he admitted. "I deserved it," Ryan acknowledged. "But instead you gave me a chance to make things right. Not many people would have done that." Tom was quiet for a moment. "My drill sergeant in basic training had a saying, 'How you respond to your worst mistake tells me more than all your successes combined.'" He looked at Ryan directly. "You responded well." Coming from Tom, it was high praise. Ryan felt a warm sense of pride that had become increasingly familiar over the past weeks. Anyway, Ryan continued, I wanted you to know that working with you and Rusty, it changed how I see things, made me think about what I'm doing with my life. And what's that? Tom asked. Ryan smiled. Well, for starters, I've been talking with Dr. Peterson. He needs someone part-time at the clinic helping with the animals, especially the ones recovering from surgery or injuries. Said I have a knack for it. You do, Tom agreed without hesitation. And I've been thinking about going back to school eventually. Not right away, but maybe in a year or so. There's a program for veterinary technicians at the community college. Tom nodded, seeming unsurprised by this news. You'd be good at it. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the river flow past. Rusty had settled into a contented doze at their feet, his body relaxed in the autumn sunshine. So, Tom said finally, about the shelter. Ryan perked up. He'd been volunteering at the animal shelter where Tom helped out, spending every Saturday working with the dogs that needed special attention or rehabilitation. It had quickly become the highlight of his week. What about it? Ryan asked. They're looking for someone to coordinate the rehabilitation program. 20 hours a week, paid position. Tom glanced at him. I suggested you. Ryan stared at him, momentarily speechless. Me? But I've only been volunteering a few weeks. You have a way with the difficult cases, the ones other people give up on. Tom shrugged. Seems fitting considering how we met. The irony wasn't lost on Ryan. From the guy who almost ruined your dog to the guy who helped save other dogs. He shook his head, still processing. Do you really think I'm qualified? I wouldn't have recommended you if I didn't. Tom's tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. Besides, they've seen your work. The director was impressed with how you handled that nervous shepherd mix last weekend. Ryan remembered the dog, a skinny, frightened animal that had been found abandoned near the highway. He'd spent hours just sitting quietly in the kennel, gradually earning the dog's trust with patience and gentle persistence. I'll think about it, Ryan said, though they both knew he'd already made up his mind. Good. Tom stood up, signaling to Rusty that it was time to move on. Now we'd better head to the cafe. Diane will think we're not coming. Their Sunday morning visits to the riverfront cafe had become a tradition over the past month, once Rusty was well enough for regular outings. The staff and regular customers had gradually accepted Ryan's presence, moving from cautious tolerance to genuine welcome as they witnessed his dedication to Rusty's recovery. As they approached the cafe, Ryan could see their usual corner table was already prepared. Water bowl for Rusty, coffee mugs waiting to be filled. Diane waved from behind the counter, and Leo gave a thumbs up from the kitchen doorway. Looks like the whole gang's here, Ryan observed. Sunday tradition, Tom replied with a nod. They settled at their table, Rusty lying contentedly at their feet without needing to be told. The routine was familiar now, comforting in its predictability. Diane approached with the coffee pot. Well, look at our star patient, walking like a young pup again. She filled their mugs, then bent to give Rusty a gentle scratch behind the ears. Special banana pancakes today, just for you, she told the dog with a wink. After she left, Ryan took a sip of his coffee, savoring the familiar taste and the moment. Never thought I'd be a regular here, he mused. Especially not after, you know. Tom followed his gaze to the spot where the accident had happened 6 weeks ago. Life takes strange turns. Speaking of turns, Ryan said, remembering something. I finally got rid of that mountain bike. Sold it yesterday. Tom raised an eyebrow. No more cycling. Oh, I still ride. Just got a new bike. One with better brakes. Ryan smiled sheepishly. And I leave my phone in my pocket now. Always. Lessons learned the hard way stick the best, Tom said, nodding approval. The cafe had filled up around them, the Sunday morning crowd creating a pleasant backdrop of conversation and clattering dishes. Ryan recognized many of the faces now. The older couple who always ordered matching omelets, the young woman who brought a different book each week, the firefighter and his teenage daughter who came after her soccer practice. What had once been an anonymous coffee stop on his way to meet friends had become a community. People with names and stories and connections, all because of one terrible mistake and the chance to make it right. You know, Ryan said thoughtfully, my mom used to tell me everything happens for a reason. I never really believed that until now. Tom considered this, watching as Rusty shifted position to keep both of them in his sightline, ever the vigilant service dog even in his moments of rest. Don't know if there's always a reason, Tom replied finally, but there's always a choice about what happens next. You made a good one. Before Ryan could respond, Mike appeared at their table, newspaper tucked under his arm. Room for one more? He asked, gesturing to the empty chair. Always, Tom said, and Ryan nodded agreement as Mike joined them, launching into a story about the town council's latest debate over the riverfront development. Ryan felt a deep sense of contentment wash over him. 6 weeks ago, he'd been racing through life without paying attention, focused only on where he was going next, never on where he actually was. Now, sitting at a cafe table with a retired soldier, a golden retriever with a slight limp, and a former teacher with strong opinions about local politics, Ryan was exactly where he wanted to be, present in a moment that would never have existed if not for his worst mistake and the mercy that followed it. Under the table, Rusty shifted slightly, resting his head on Ryan's foot. The simple gesture of trust from an animal he had once hurt brought a lump to Ryan's throat. Some debts could never be fully repaid, but that didn't mean you stopped trying. And sometimes, in the trying, you found something you never knew you were missing. As the morning sun climbed higher, warming the wooden deck of the riverfront cafe, 3 unlikely friends shared coffee, conversation, and the simple joy of a Sunday tradition that had been born from disaster, but had grown into something none of them would trade for the world.